The illusion of safety is a powerful thing. We build our lives on foundations of trust, in our partners, our families, our closest confidants. We believe that certain bonds are unbreakable, that some relationships are too sacred to be corrupted by the baser instincts of human nature. But what happens when that illusion shatters? What if the hand that was meant to lift you up is the very one that plunges you into the abyss? This isn't just a story about a yacht or a staggering fortune. It's a stark, chilling reminder of the darkness that can fester beneath the surface of seemingly perfect lives, and the extraordinary strength it takes to rise from the depths of betrayal. It's a narrative that forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about greed, entitlement, and the often unseen resilience of the human spirit. Imagine standing at the pinnacle of your life, gazing out at a glittering ocean under a blanket of stars. You're celebrating your 5th wedding anniversary aboard a luxury yacht, surrounded by what you believe to be the people who love you most. The air is warm, the champagne sparkles, and the gentle rocking of the waves lulls you into a sense of profound peace. This was Priscilla Winter's reality, just moments before her world dissolved into a maelstrom of salt, terror, and the icy realization that her fairy tale was, in fact, a meticulously planned nightmare. The burn of the salt water in Priscilla's throat was an immediate, visceral assault. One moment, she was toasting to a future she believed in, a future built on shared dreams and colossal achievements. The next, she was gasping, fighting desperately against the churning Pacific, the opulent lights of her own yacht shrinking into indifferent pinpricks against the vast, dark canvas of the ocean. "Say hello to the sharks," a voice, devoid of any warmth, had whispered in her ear. Her husband, Robert. Then, the brutal, unexpected shove. The impact of the water was shocking, but it was the sound that followed. A cacophony of laughter. Robert's triumphant cackle, interwoven with the cruel, piercing cackle of her mother-in-law, Eleanor, that truly froze her blood. It was the sound of pure, unadulterated malice, celebrating her impending doom. As her evening dress, a symbol of the celebratory night, became a heavy shroud dragging her down, fragments of overheard conversations, previously dismissed as innocent or misunderstood, clicked into place with horrifying clarity. A surprise party for their anniversary? No. They were meticulously plotting her demise. The prenup makes this impossible any other way. Eleanor's voice cold and calculating from the cabin just hours earlier. Priscilla, fetching her jacket, had initially thought she was mishearing or that they were discussing some abstract business scenario. "If she divorces you, you get nothing. But if she dies, she has to die out here." Robert's chilling reply, outlining the spoils. "The life insurance alone is worth $50 million, plus her company shares, the properties, everything. We just have to make sure there's nobody to examine." The weight of those words, now undeniable truth, pressed down on her more savagely than the ocean itself. 5 years of marriage, a business empire built from the ground up, a life woven together thread by thread, all of it a lie, a carefully constructed trap. She remembered stepping back onto the deck, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, feigning normalcy. The clandestine glances between Robert and Eleanor, the way Eleanor poured something into her champagne glass when she thought Priscilla wasn't looking. The subtle, insidious poison that had been creeping into her life for who knew how long, culminating in this horrific betrayal. It was then that she knew. Now, adrift in the cold, unforgiving vastness, Priscilla felt a primal rage ignite within her. It wasn't just the betrayal that fueled it. It was their sheer, arrogant stupidity. They thought she was some fragile trophy wife, a helpless victim to be discarded when her utility ran out. They had fundamentally misjudged the woman they were dealing with. Priscilla Winters wasn't born into wealth. She'd clawed her way up from poverty, worked 3 grueling jobs to put herself through college, and carved out a billion-dollar tech empire in a male-dominated industry where every step was a battle. Giving up wasn't in her DNA. 2 greedy, entitled schemers were not going to be the architects of her final chapter. This primal instinct for survival, for self-preservation against impossible odds, is something we often see in the most extraordinary real-life stories. Think of Aaron Ralston, who, trapped by a boulder in a remote canyon, chose to sever his own arm rather than succumb. or the countless individuals who, against all medical predictions, recover from devastating illnesses through sheer force of will. While Priscilla's immediate challenge was physical, the underlying current was her indomitable spirit, the refusal to surrender to a fate dictated by others. It's a testament to the fact that when pushed to the absolute edge, humanity often discovers reserves of strength previously unknown. A piece of debris, part of the yacht's railing, drifted past her. A lifeline, however small. She grabbed it, using it to keep her head above water, to conserve precious energy, to buy time for thought. The yacht's lights were fading fast, a cruel beacon of her disappearing past. Robert, she knew, would already be rehearsing his performance, the grieving widower, inconsolable after a tragic accident. "She fell overboard during dinner," he'd tell the Coast Guard, tears undoubtedly welling, genuine or otherwise, at the thought of the millions streaming into his accounts. "I tried to save her, but the current was too strong. The love of my life is gone." But Robert, in his arrogance, had overlooked critical details. Priscilla was an exceptional swimmer, a skill honed during summers spent as a lifeguard, a detail she'd never shared with Robert because he'd never bothered to ask about her life before him. More importantly, she possessed a stubbornness as unyielding as granite, and an intellect that dwarfed both Robert and Eleanor combined. The late spring waters off the California coast, though cold, weren't immediately deadly. She had hours, perhaps even a full night, to survive. The debris was an unexpected gift, offering buoyancy and a chance to strategize. Robert's planning, while elaborate, had one fatal flaw. It was predicated on her immediate death. He'd chosen international waters to complicate jurisdiction, likely disabled the boat's emergency beacons. Eleanor's involvement confirmed this was a calculated family conspiracy, not a spontaneous act. But by leaving her alive, they had unleashed a force far more dangerous than they could ever comprehend. As the yacht's last glimmer vanished, Priscilla allowed herself one brief, pure surge of fury. Then she ruthlessly suppressed it. Survival first, revenge later. The stars above her were sharp and clear, and in the faint eastern glow, she could discern the distant coastline. The current, miraculously, was pulling her towards it. She would float, she would swim, she would conserve. This wasn't just about survival, it was about laying the groundwork for what came next. The sun, a fiery oracle, began to paint the horizon in hues of orange and pink, a breathtaking sight under different circumstances. Priscilla had been in the water for nearly 8 hours. Her lips were cracked, her skin a prune-like testament to her ordeal. But she was alive. The debris, a piece of ornate railing, had been her constant companion, allowing her intermittent rest. Her formidable business mind, a tool usually applied to market strategy and corporate acquisitions, had meticulously sifted through the wreckage of her marriage, dissecting Robert's finances, their shared assets, and the legal implications of his heinous act. Attempted murder was just the beginning. The fraudulent claims he'd inevitably make on her life insurance and company shares would expose him to an even greater legal peril. Suddenly, the rhythmic thrum of an engine cut through the silence. A small fishing boat, a beacon of hope, was making its way across the water. Priscilla, summoning every last ounce of her depleted strength, waved and shouted, knowing it was likely futile, but refusing to yield. The boat, miraculously, turned in her direction. 20 minutes later, wrapped in a coarse blanket aboard the Lucky Strike, Priscilla found herself trying to convince Captain Miguel Santos and his 3-man crew that she wasn't a deranged survivor of a maritime mishap, but the victim of an attempted murder. Their skeptical faces mirrored her torn evening dress, her lack of identification, her unbelievable story. "My husband pushed me off our yacht," she repeated, accepting a steaming cup of coffee. "This wasn't an accident." Miguel, with the weary compassion of someone who'd seen too much of the ocean's unforgiving nature, offered gentle platitudes about shock and memory, but Priscilla knew the truth. "What time is it?" she asked, her mind already racing. Just after 7 in the morning, 9 hours in the water. Robert would have had ample time to return to shore and begin his charade. He was likely playing the devastated husband for the Coast Guard right at that moment. "I need to ask you for a favor," Priscilla said, her voice firm despite her exhaustion. "Don't report finding me, not yet." The crew exchanged wary glances. "Ma'am, we have to." "My name is Priscilla Winters. I own Nexus Technologies in San Francisco. If you Google me, you'll see I'm worth about $1 billion. If my husband thinks I'm dead, he's going to try to steal everything. I need time to stop him." Miguel, intrigued despite himself, pulled out his phone. His eyes widened as he scrolled through images and articles. "Holy, you're really her." "I'm really her," Priscilla affirmed, "and I'm really in trouble." The fishing boat was headed for Mendocino, a quaint coastal town a few hours north of San Francisco. Miguel, swayed by the magnitude of her story and the promise of a substantial donation to the local fishing community, agreed to drop her off discreetly. As they approached shore, Priscilla used Miguel's phone to check the news. There it was, already breaking. Tech billionaire presumed dead after falling from yacht. The narrative was precisely as she'd predicted. Robert, the distraught husband, reporting her missing, the Coast Guard search yielding little hope. The comment sections were a morbid carnival of condolences and speculation. Succession plans, stock prices, inheritance. If only they knew, she thought, a grim smile touching her chapped lips. The journey to shore was a whirlwind of strategic planning. First, practicalities: clothes, money, a safe haven. Second, covert communication, reaching out to her most trusted employees without alerting Robert. Third, evidence gathering, building an unassailable case against their conspiracy. But paramount to all, she needed to vanish, to become a ghost, until she was ready to strike. Robert and Eleanor, in their short-sighted arrogance, had fatally underestimated her. They saw a woman softened by luxury. They failed to see the hardened fighter who had built an empire from nothing. That oversight, Priscilla knew, would be their undoing. As the Lucky Strike pulled into Mendocino Harbor, Priscilla felt an unexpected surge of excitement. Yes, her husband had tried to murder her. Yes, her deepest trust had been irrevocably shattered. But she was alive. She was free, and she possessed the ultimate weapon: complete surprise. Robert and Eleanor had no idea what was coming. The Mendocino Motel, far from the opulent suites she was accustomed to, served her purpose perfectly. She checked in as Patricia Wilson, a subtle shift that allowed for natural responses, yet evaded casual searches. The elderly clerk, blessedly incurious, accepted cash without asking for ID when Priscilla feigned a stolen purse. 3 days of rest, of simple food and undisturbed sleep, began to mend her physical exhaustion. But what she uncovered during her digital deep dive, using the motel's computer and a library card obtained with her assumed identity, shook her to her core. The betrayal was even more insidious than she'd imagined. Robert wasn't merely claiming her inheritance. He was systematically rewriting their shared history. According to interviews he'd given to reporters, their marriage had been fraught with tension for months. Priscilla, he claimed, had been drinking heavily, consumed by paranoia about business competitors, convinced everyone was trying to steal her company's secrets. The night she died, she'd been erratic, accusing him of plotting against her. His eyes red-rimmed with what appeared to be genuine tears, he told CNN, "She kept saying I wanted to hurt her. I tried to get her help, but she wouldn't listen. I think the stress of running such a large company finally broke her. The last thing she said to me was that she couldn't trust anyone anymore." It was a masterpiece of manipulative storytelling, positioning himself as the long-suffering husband, setting the stage for his quick inheritance. But Priscilla knew the truth behind every artfully constructed lie. Her drinking problem was 2 glasses of wine at a business dinner 3 months prior, which Robert had publicly chastised her for. Her paranoia was a legitimate concern about Rebecca, her assistant, who had been asking peculiar questions about company finances and displayed an unnerving familiarity with their personal life. And Rebecca, that particular betrayal sliced deep. Social media posts, now private but cached online, painted a sickeningly clear picture. Rebecca and Robert had been having an affair for at least 6 months, perhaps longer. The woman entrusted with Priscilla's schedule, her passwords, her most confidential documents, had been systematically feeding information to her husband. Photos of expensive jewelry, now chillingly identifiable as items Robert had bought with their joint credit card. Pictures taken in restaurants Priscilla had planned for romantic anniversaries, reservations she'd asked Rebecca to make. The most damning, a photo from 2 weeks ago, Rebecca wearing a necklace Priscilla had thought she'd lost, only for Robert to suggest it was at the office. Now she knew he'd gifted it to his lover. The deeper Priscilla dug, the more the horrifying scope of their plan revealed itself. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a cold, calculated plot, over a year in the making. Eleanor's financial records, accessed through a cash-paid private investigator, screamed desperation. Her lavish lifestyle had outpaced her means. She owed nearly $2 million, on the verge of financial ruin. Priscilla's death wasn't just a payday for Robert. It was Eleanor's last chance at salvation, a means to replace stolen funds from her late husband's estate, a crime that would have sent her to prison. The yacht trip itself, a supposed family bonding experience, had been Eleanor's brainchild, insistently pushed despite Robert's initial reluctance. Now Priscilla understood Eleanor's meticulous demands for their route, international waters, far from immediate legal reach. Eleanor had even insisted on dismissing the usual crew, citing a need for privacy, allowing Robert to hire a temporary captain, Jimmy Torres, who knew none of them personally. Torres's statement to the Coast Guard, a picture of a happy family, Priscilla excusing herself for air, Robert discovering her missing, devastated but strong, was a carefully constructed facade. Nothing hinted at the sinister undercurrents. Tomorrow, Priscilla vowed, the fighting back would begin. The resilience of Priscilla, her analytical approach to survival and revenge, serves as a powerful illustration of adaptive leadership, even in personal crises. In the business world, we often speak of pivoting in the face of market disruption. Priscilla's situation was a personal disruption of the highest order, and her response was a masterclass in strategic maneuvering. She didn't react emotionally in the long term. She gathered data, identified key players, understood their motivations, and leveraged her existing networks, albeit covertly. This ability to detach, analyze, and execute under extreme pressure is a hallmark of truly exceptional individuals, whether in a boardroom or fighting for their lives in the middle of the ocean. Priscilla's first call was to Thomas Chin, her chief technology officer at Nexus Technologies, the only person she trusted implicitly. Using a prepaid burner phone, she called his personal number at 6 a.m., knowing he'd be awake and alone. "Tom, it's me. Don't say my name, don't react, and don't tell anyone about this call." A long, stunned silence. "Is this some kind of joke? Because if it is, it's not funny. We buried you yesterday." The words, heavy with the weight of her fake funeral, struck her like a physical blow. They had already mourned her, while she'd been meticulously planning their downfall from a dingy motel. "I'm alive, Tom. Robert pushed me off the yacht. I survived, but I need to stay dead until I can prove what he did." Another pause. Tom's heavy breathing audible. "Where are you?" "Somewhere safe, but I need your help. What's happening at the company?" Tom's voice, carefully controlled, conveyed the chaos. Robert was at Nexus every day, meeting with lawyers about succession. Board members were pushing for him to take over as interim CEO, exactly as predicted. Robert had been systematically inserting himself into company decisions, attending meetings, cultivating relationships, positioning himself for this moment. "What about the financials? Has he accessed any company accounts?" He'd been questioning cash reserves, revenue projections. Rebecca's been helping him gather information. Of course she had. Rebecca, privy to Nexus's intricate financial architecture, had been Robert's perfect insider. "Tom, I need you to do something for me, but it has to be completely secret. Can you access our security footage from the past 3 months? I need to see who Rebecca was meeting with and when, and start documenting everything Robert does, every meeting, every financial request, every decision. And Tom, be careful. If they killed me, they might be dangerous to anyone who gets in their way." Ending the call, Priscilla felt a powerful mix of relief and steely resolve. Tom, in his critical position, could gather evidence without raising suspicion. But she needed more than one ally. Her next call was to Janet Kim, her personal lawyer. Janet had drafted the ironclad prenup designed to protect Priscilla's assets in the event of divorce, the very document that had, ironically, sealed Robert's decision to commit murder. "Janet, "I need to see you, but Robert can't know about it." Janet's shock was profound, mirroring Tom's. "Priscilla, but we had your funeral. How is this possible?" "I'll explain everything when I see you. Can you meet me somewhere private?" They arranged to meet that evening at Janet's secluded home office, an hour from San Francisco. The drive gave Priscilla time to refine her strategy. Simply appearing publicly and accusing Robert wouldn't work. His fabricated narrative of her mental instability, coupled with a lack of witnesses to the yacht incident, would turn it into her word against his. She needed overwhelming, irrefutable evidence. Janet's reaction to seeing Priscilla alive was everything she could have hoped for. After the initial disbelief, her lawyer's instincts took over. Questions flew, detailed notes were meticulously recorded. "We need to be strategic," Janet confirmed after hearing the full, harrowing account. "Robert's already filed paperwork to claim your life insurance and inherit your Nexus Technologies shares. If you appear too soon, he could claim you staged your own death for attention or to damage his reputation." "What do you recommend?" Priscilla asked. "We need to gather evidence of the conspiracy first. Phone records, financial documents, anything that shows premeditation. Then, witnesses who can testify to Robert's behavior before and after your supposed death." Janet pulled out a thick file labeled with Priscilla's name. "I've been handling some unusual requests from Robert's lawyers. They want to accelerate the probate process and transfer your assets as quickly as possible." That's suspicious in itself. Most widowers would be too devastated to focus on money so soon after losing their spouse. They worked until midnight, crafting a comprehensive plan. Janet would continue to handle Robert's requests, secretly documenting everything, and would hire private investigators to track Robert and Eleanor. Tom would gather internal evidence from Nexus, focusing on communications between Robert and Rebecca and monitoring suspicious transactions. Priscilla would remain hidden, meticulously building her case, leveraging her business contacts to verify Robert's financial situation and motives. When they had an undeniable mountain of proof, she would make her dramatic return. "There's one more thing," Janet added. "The prenup was very specific about what Robert would inherit if you died. He gets almost nothing, just the house and a small trust fund. Your business assets, investments, and most of your personal property go to the charity foundation you established." Priscilla smiled grimly. So, his primary benefit was the $50 million life insurance, plus whatever he could embezzle from Nexus before the board caught on. That explained the frantic rush to become CEO. He knew his window was limited, but he'd made a critical error. He assumed Priscilla was too trusting to have built robust backup plans for her most vital relationships, unaware of her secure communication channel with Tom, or the additional legal safeguards Janet had recommended. Most critically, he didn't know she was alive and orchestrating his downfall. The complex network of allies Priscilla assembled, from her CTO to her lawyer and a detective, highlights the critical role of trust and strategic alliances in overcoming immense challenges. In competitive business environments, forming such alliances can determine the success or failure of ventures. In personal crises, as Priscilla demonstrates, it can literally be the difference between life and death. Her ability to identify trustworthy individuals, articulate her predicament clearly, and empower them with specific roles showcases remarkable leadership even when operating from the shadows. This wasn't merely revenge. It was a sophisticated multi-front campaign requiring coordination, discretion, and unshakable belief in her cause. 2 weeks into her clandestine investigation, Priscilla had forged an intricate web of allies, a counter-conspiracy Robert couldn't possibly have imagined. From her Mendocino hideout, she'd discreetly reached out to carefully vetted employees, business partners, and legal contacts, each playing a crucial role in gathering evidence while maintaining her cover. The most invaluable addition to her growing team was Detective Sarah Rodriguez from the San Francisco Police Department. Sarah, a seasoned investigator of white-collar crime, had worked on Nexus Technologies cases before and had always impressed Priscilla with her thoroughness and unwavering integrity. When Janet cautiously approached her about the suspicious circumstances surrounding Priscilla's presumed death, Sarah, sensing the potential for a deeper, more sinister truth, agreed to conduct an unofficial investigation. "I've been looking at the timeline," Sarah reported during a secure video call. "Robert's story has several inconsistencies. He claims he searched for you for 30 minutes before alerting the captain, but the boat's GPS shows they changed course only 10 minutes after your reported disappearance. Either he's lying about how long he looked, or he knew exactly where you went overboard. And Sarah had also uncovered a crucial detail. Robert had purchased additional life insurance on Priscilla just 6 months before the yacht trip, boosting the total payout to an astonishing $50 million, a suspiciously large increase for someone supposedly without financial woes. Tom's parallel investigation within Nexus Technologies yielded even more damaging evidence. Security footage showed Rebecca repeatedly accessing Priscilla's office computer after hours, copying files to external drives. She'd also been photographed meeting with Robert in a hotel parking garage across town, meetings with no conceivable connection to company business. They were careful, Tom reported during one of their encrypted calls, but not careful enough. Rebecca thought she deleted the email trail between her and Robert, but our backup servers kept copies of everything. I've got months of communications about their relationship and their plans for after you were gone. The emails were a disturbing read, detailing everything from which of Priscilla's jewelry Rebecca coveted to their lavish vacation plans once the inheritance was secured. In one particularly damning message, Robert had written, "After this weekend, we'll never have to worry about money again. You just need to keep playing your part until everything is settled." But the most shocking discovery emanated from Eleanor's financial records. Janet's private investigator unearthed that Eleanor wasn't merely in debt. She had been systematically stealing from her late husband's estate, which she was legally bound to manage as a trustee for other family members. Her extravagant lifestyle had finally caught up to her, threatening her with severe criminal charges. "She needed you dead as much as Robert did," Janet explained. "Your inheritance would have given her enough money to replace what she stole and avoid prison. This was never just about greed. It was about survival." The conspiracy was far more elaborate, and Eleanor a far more active participant than Priscilla had initially grasped. Eleanor had helped plan the yacht trip, dictated the route into international waters, and even researched ways to make a drowning appear accidental. But while her enemies were busy congratulating themselves, Priscilla had been building a coalition for justice. Maria Santos, Nexus Technologies' head of human resources, had noticed Rebecca's suspicious activities months prior. Rebecca had been accessing personnel files without authorization, asking unusual questions about succession planning. When Maria tried to voice her concerns to Priscilla, Rebecca had intercepted the message, dismissing them as minor administrative issues. Now Maria realized Rebecca had been actively preventing Priscilla from uncovering the internal rot. She eagerly volunteered to help Tom document Rebecca's unauthorized access and policy violations. Even Captain Torres, the yacht captain, had begun to harbor doubts about Robert's story. In a follow-up interview with Detective Rodriguez, he recounted details that hadn't made it into his official statement: Robert's unnatural calm after his wife disappeared, Eleanor's immediate retreat to her cabin until the Coast Guard arrived, all striking him as deeply unsettling for concerned family members. "Most people are frantic," Torres told Sarah. "They want to help search, they ask questions, but Mr. Winters just stood at the railing, looking out at the water like he was waiting for something, and his mother acted like nothing had happened." As the weight of evidence mounted, Priscilla's confidence in her plan solidified. Their focus on immediate gain had blinded them to the carelessness of their tracks. Their arrogance, she knew, would be their downfall. But rushing her reveal could backfire. Robert's lawyers might discredit her or claim she staged the whole thing. She needed undeniable proof. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Rebecca. Overwhelmed by guilt and increasingly reliant on alcohol, Rebecca began to confess details of the conspiracy to former co-workers at bars. One of them, a woman who had always disliked Rebecca's opportunistic nature, discreetly recorded these drunken admissions. Rebecca confessed to copying files, detailed her affair with Robert, and admitted her premonition of something terrible happening during the yacht trip. While never explicitly stating murder, the implications were damning. "We're almost ready," Janet told Priscilla. "Motive, means, opportunity, documentary evidence, witness testimony. All that's missing is your dramatic return." Priscilla smiled. She had been meticulously planning this moment for weeks. It needed to be public, controlled, and utterly devastating. "I know exactly how I want to do it," she said, "and I know exactly what gift I'm going to give them." Priscilla's campaign of carefully orchestrated disruption before her big reveal illustrates a powerful lesson in strategic engagement. Sometimes, the most effective way to dismantle an enemy isn't with a direct frontal assault, but through psychological warfare and systemic undermining. It's like a chess game, where you don't just capture pieces, but subtly weaken your opponent's position, erode their morale, and force them into making self-destructive moves. This approach isn't just about vengeance, it's about control, about showing your adversary that even when they think they've won, you are pulling the strings from the shadows. From her position in the shadows, Priscilla initiated her campaign of carefully orchestrated disruption. She wasn't ready to reveal herself, but she could begin to make Robert and Eleanor's lives profoundly uncomfortable, building towards their final confrontation. The first move was financial. Leveraging her extensive business contacts and legitimate legal channels, she had Janet file challenges to several of Robert's inheritance claims. These challenges didn't reveal Priscilla was alive. They simply raised pointed questions about proper legal procedures and demanded extensive additional documentation before any assets could be transferred. "Your husband is not handling this well," Janet reported, a note of satisfaction in her voice. "His lawyers called 3 times yesterday, demanding to know who was funding these challenges and why anyone would want to delay the probate process. Robert himself showed up at my office demanding answers." The delays created a cascade of problems for Robert. He had been counting on quick access to Priscilla's assets to pay off Eleanor's mounting debts and fund his new life with Rebecca. Instead, he faced escalating legal bills and increasing pressure from Eleanor's creditors. Meanwhile, Tom, acting under Priscilla's direction, implemented subtle yet effective changes at Nexus Technologies, making Robert's attempts at takeover increasingly difficult. As CTO, Tom had the legitimate authority to institute new security protocols and access restrictions. Suddenly, Robert found himself locked out of several critical financial systems he'd previously accessed with ease. "I told him it was a routine security upgrade," Tom explained during one of their encrypted calls. "All the other executives got new access credentials within a few days, but somehow Robert's paperwork keeps getting delayed. He's furious, but there's nothing he can do without raising suspicions." Rebecca was facing her own escalating problems. Maria Santos, under the guise of a routine audit of administrative procedures, began to scrutinize Rebecca's access to confidential information. The audit was perfectly legal and adhered to company policy, but it made Rebecca's unauthorized activities far more challenging. "She's getting paranoid," Maria reported. "Yesterday she asked me if someone was investigating her. I told her the audit was just standard procedure, but I could tell she didn't believe me. She's been deleting files and trying to cover her tracks, which is only making her look more suspicious." The psychological pressure was precisely Priscilla's intent. She wanted Robert and Eleanor to feel their perfect plan unraveling, without understanding the invisible hand pulling the threads. The uncertainty would make them desperate, prone to mistakes, and mistakes they made. Robert, frustrated by legal delays and financial blockades, escalated his efforts, pressuring the Nexus Technologies Board of Directors to name him permanent CEO. He argued that the company needed stable leadership during this difficult transition, but he had fundamentally misjudged the board's loyalty to Priscilla and their growing suspicion of his motives. Board Chair Margaret Wu, a woman who had worked with Priscilla for over a decade, had always seen through Robert's superficial charm. When he started demanding immediate control of company finances, she began asking uncomfortable questions. Mr. Winters seemed to think he had some kind of automatic right to take over his wife's position, Margaret told Detective Rodriguez during a voluntary interview. But Priscilla had very specific succession plans that didn't include him. She always said she wanted the company to remain independent and employee-focused, not controlled by someone who'd never contributed to its success. Margaret's staunch resistance created the precise public conflict Priscilla needed, drawing business reporters to cover the succession struggle, raising questions about Robert's qualifications and his relationship with Nexus's culture. Eleanor, meanwhile, was grappling with her own escalating crisis. Her creditors, tired of empty promises of an inheritance tied up in endless legal complications, began demanding immediate payment. One even threatened a lawsuit that would expose her long-term theft from her late husband's estate. In a spiraling desperation, Eleanor pressured Robert to find alternative sources of money, suggesting he take loans against his expected inheritance or find other, faster ways to access Priscilla's assets. These increasingly frantic conversations, conducted over phone calls that Detective Rodriguez was now monitoring with proper warrants, provided further damning evidence of the conspiracy. Eleanor's desperation made her reckless, her words a clear confession. "We can't wait for these legal games to play out," she wailed during one recorded call. "I need money now, or everything we did will have been for nothing. Find another way to get what's ours." Robert's response was equally incriminating. "I'm trying, Mother, but people are asking too many questions. It's almost like someone knows what we did and is deliberately making things difficult." They were closer to the truth than they realized, but their paranoia was working in Priscilla's favor. The more desperate they became, the more mistakes they made, the more they incriminated themselves. The final piece of Priscilla's disruption campaign involved Rebecca's spiraling alcohol problem. The immense guilt and stress of her participation in the conspiracy, combined with Robert's increasing coldness as their plan crumbled, drove Rebecca to drink heavily almost every night. One night, in a drunken, emotional haze, she made the critical mistake of calling Robert. Tom, under the guise of a security upgrade, had ensured that all calls to and from Rebecca's work extension were recorded. The recording captured Rebecca breaking down, admitting her terror that they would all go to prison for what they had done to Priscilla. "I can't sleep," Rebecca sobbed into the phone. "I keep thinking about her in that water, and I know we killed her. What if someone finds out? What if they figure out what really happened on that boat?" Robert's attempts to calm her only dug them deeper. Instead of denying his involvement, he focused on reassuring Rebecca that they wouldn't get caught. "Nobody knows what really happened except us," he told her. "Priscilla is gone, and there's no evidence that it wasn't an accident. We just have to stay calm and stick to the story." This recording was evidentiary gold, confirming Rebecca's knowledge of the murder, Robert's complicity, and their conscious efforts to cover up their crimes. Perhaps the most satisfying aspect of Priscilla's covert operation was watching her enemies turn on each other. The relentless stress and paranoia gnawed at their relationships, breeding suspicion and resentment. Eleanor blamed Robert for poor planning, for inadequate legal and financial preparations. Robert blamed Rebecca for her indiscreet affair and careless handling of company information. Rebecca, caught in this middle, blamed both of them for coercing her into a situation she never truly wanted. "They're eating each other alive," Detective Rodriguez observed during a strategy session. "It's almost sad to watch if you can forget they tried to commit murder." Priscilla felt no such sympathy. They had made their choices, and now they were reaping the bitter harvest, but she wasn't ready to end their suffering just yet. She wanted them to experience the same helplessness and terror she had felt, adrift in the ocean, wondering if her life was about to end because of their insatiable greed. The psychological torture would continue for a few more weeks. Then, when they were at their most vulnerable and desperate, she would make her dramatic return and deliver the final, crushing blow. But first, she needed to prepare the perfect stage for their confrontation. The psychological disintegration of Robert, Eleanor, and Rebecca is a compelling study in the corrosive nature of guilt and unchecked ambition. While Priscilla's actions were strategic, the implosion of her adversaries came from within, fueled by their own character flaws. This mirrors patterns observed in criminal psychology, where elaborate plots often unravel not because of external forces alone, but due to internal strife, paranoia, and the inherent difficulties of maintaining a complex lie under pressure. The weight of their actions, combined with Priscilla's calculated psychological warfare, broke them down piece by piece, illustrating that true justice often involves a reckoning that extends beyond legal penalties, reaching into the very core of one's being. Robert Winters looked like a man who had aged 10 years in a single month. His hair was streaked with gray at the temples, his frame gaunt from stress, his once impeccable appearance replaced by disheveled desperation. The charming, sophisticated man he'd once presented himself as was gone, revealing the desperate criminal beneath. Priscilla watched him through binoculars from her rented car, parked discreetly across the street from their former home. She'd spent the past week observing his routines, documenting his increasingly erratic behavior, and what she saw satisfied her deep-seated sense of justice. Robert's days followed a predictable pattern of failure and frustration, leaving the house trying to project confidence, returning each evening more defeated. His legal meetings were fruitless, his attempts to seize control of Nexus Technologies thwarted by a loyal board, and even his relationship with Rebecca was crumbling under the immense pressure. Eleanor was in even worse shape. Priscilla's private investigator reported a woman in complete panic, stalked by creditors, circling like sharks, threatening lawsuits and criminal charges. She had been forced to sell most of her cherished jewelry and put her house on the market, but it was a futile attempt to cover her gargantuan debts. The stress had taken a devastating toll on her physical health. She'd made 2 emergency room visits in a week, complaining of chest pains that were diagnosed as severe panic attacks. Anxiety medication offered little solace against the root cause of her terror. "She looks terrible," the investigator reported. "Scared, paranoid, jumping at shadows. Yesterday, she spent 3 hours at the police station trying to convince them someone was stalking her. They couldn't find any evidence of it." Of course they couldn't. Priscilla was too cunning to be physically detected. Instead, she subtly ensured Eleanor caught fleeting glimpses of figures at a distance. Figures who vanished when Eleanor tried to approach. A masterful psychological game designed to amplify her paranoia. Rebecca's situation was arguably the most pathetic. Her drinking problem had become so severe that she was regularly missing work and often intoxicated when she did appear. Tom meticulously documented her decline, both as evidence and to protect Nexus Technologies from her increasingly erratic behavior. "She's completely falling apart," Tom reported. "Yesterday, she started crying during a board meeting and ran out of the room. Maria's preparing to fire her for cause, which means no severance or benefits." The affair between Robert and Rebecca had withered under the pressure. Robert, overwhelmed, had become cold and distant with everyone. Rebecca, consumed by guilt and addiction, had become an unbearable liability. But Priscilla's favorite part of their downward spiral was watching them blame each other. Recorded conversations captured by Detective Rodriguez revealed increasingly hostile exchanges. "This is your fault!" Eleanor screamed at Robert during one monitored call. "You promised this would be simple, that we'd have the money by now. Instead, we have nothing but problems and questions." Robert's retort was equally furious. "I did my part. I got rid of her like we planned. It's not my fault the legal system is more complicated than we expected." "Got rid of her?" Eleanor shrieked. "Don't talk about it like that on the phone, you idiot." But it was too late. Between the recordings, the documentary evidence, and the witness testimony, the case against them was overwhelming. Detective Rodriguez had more than enough evidence for arrests. The pressure was driving Robert to desperate, illegal acts. He'd applied for fraudulent loans using Priscilla's identity, attempted to forge her signature on financial documents. Each attempt was blocked by Janet's carefully placed security measures, but each provided further undeniable evidence of his criminal intent. Eleanor, pushed to the brink, approached her late husband's family members, attempting to borrow money against her expected inheritance from Priscilla's estate. Those family members, already suspicious about missing funds from their patriarch's estate, began asking uncomfortable questions Eleanor couldn't answer. "She's trapped," Janet observed with grim satisfaction. "The theft from her husband's estate is about to be exposed. Her creditors are demanding payments she can't make, and now she's committed additional fraud by trying to borrow money against assets she doesn't actually have." Rebecca's downward spiral had become a deliberate act of self-sabotage. Her guilt over Priscilla's presumed death manifested as a subconscious drive to confess. She openly spoke of her involvement in something terrible at bars, neglected her appearance, and even tried to return some of the jewelry Robert had given her. "She wants to get caught," the private investigator reported. "I've seen this before. She's unconsciously trying to confess and face the consequences." All three were exactly where Priscilla wanted them: desperate, paranoid, turning on each other, and making increasingly stupid mistakes. Their arrogance and confidence, the very traits that enabled their crime, had vanished. Now they were just scared criminals, awaiting the inevitable. The time had come for the final blow. Priscilla spent the next few days preparing for her grand finale. She arranged for a delivery of white lilies to the house, the same flowers Robert had chosen for her fake funeral. She compiled professional photographs of all the evidence her team had gathered, organizing it into an undeniable presentation. Most importantly, she selected the perfect gift to accompany her return from the dead. It was a beautiful music box playing Amazing Grace, the song performed at her funeral. Inside, instead of a dancing figurine, was a small scroll containing copies of all the evidence against Robert, Eleanor, and Rebecca. Bank records, recorded conversations, witness statements, security footage, and a forensic analysis of the yacht trip proving her fall had been intentional. The box was wrapped in elegant paper, adorned with a card that read, "For my loving family who thought they'd seen the last of me, with all my love, Priscilla." Tomorrow, Robert and Eleanor would receive a call from estate lawyers inviting them to an important meeting to finalize Priscilla's will. They would arrive, expecting to finally claim their inheritance. Instead, they would find Priscilla waiting with her gift and a very different kind of surprise. The phone rang at precisely 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. Robert answered, his voice strained with the perpetual anxiety that had become his shadow. "Mr. Winters, this is James Patterson from Patterson, Sterling and Associates. We're handling the final distribution of your wife's estate. We need to meet with you and Mrs. Eleanor Winters this afternoon to conclude some important paperwork." The law firm was legitimate. Priscilla had hired them for this precise purpose. James Patterson, a respected estate attorney, believed he was simply finalizing a routine inheritance. He had no idea he was a pawn in an elaborate trap. "Can't we handle this over the phone?" Robert asked, his paranoia piqued by any deviation from routine. "I'm afraid not, Mr. Winters. There are several documents that require witness signatures, and we've discovered some complications regarding Mrs. Winters' charitable foundation that need immediate attention. The meeting shouldn't take more than an hour." The mention of complications made Robert's stomach churn, but he couldn't refuse without raising suspicion. The lawyers were his primary source of information about the probate process. He needed to know what these new issues entailed. "Where do you want to meet?" "We thought it would be most convenient to meet at your home, since we'll need access to Mrs. Winters' personal papers and effects. Would 4 p.m. work for your schedule?" Robert agreed, every instinct screaming a warning. When he called Eleanor, she shared his suspicions but reached the same conclusion. They had no choice but to attend. "Maybe this is it," Eleanor said, trying to sound hopeful. "Maybe they've finally sorted out all the legal issues and we can get our money." But neither truly believed it. The past month had taught them nothing about this inheritance would be simple. They were oblivious to the fact that Priscilla had spent the morning preparing for their arrival. She had entered the house using her key. Robert, in his supreme arrogance, hadn't bothered to change the locks, assuming his dead wife wouldn't need access. The familiar surroundings unleashed a flood of memories, both cherished and horrifying. But she ruthlessly pushed the emotions aside, focusing on the task. The living room was as she remembered it, save for the telltale signs of Robert's stress. Empty bottles, overflowing ashtrays, scattered legal documents, a silent chronicle of a man unraveling. She moved through the space like a phantom, meticulously setting the stage for the confrontation. The music box sat on the coffee table, elegantly wrapped. Beside it, a bottle of champagne, the same brand they'd been drinking on the yacht the night he tried to kill her. 2 glasses, poised for a toast Robert and Eleanor would never forget. Hidden cameras would capture every moment. Detective Rodriguez and her team were positioned outside, ready to move. Janet monitored from a surveillance van, prepared for any contingency. At 3:45 p.m., Priscilla took her seat in her favorite armchair, a simple black dress, funeral appropriate, she thought with dark humor, her hair styled exactly as it had been on their last anniversary. She wanted Robert to see precisely what he had tried to destroy. The sound of a car in the driveway made her pulse quicken, but her hands remained steady. She was ready. Robert's key turned in the lock at precisely 4 p.m. She heard his voice, tense, discussing expectations with Eleanor in the hallway. Their footsteps approached the living room, and Priscilla held her breath. "Hello, Robert. Hello, Eleanor." The silence that followed her greeting was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic tick of the old mantelpiece clock. Robert froze in the doorway, his face ashen with shock, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Eleanor gripped his arm, her knuckles white. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Priscilla said calmly, relishing their terror more than she'd expected. "Please come in. I've been waiting for you." Robert finally found his voice, a raw croak. "This isn't possible. You're dead. We saw you fall. You drowned." "Did I?" Priscilla countered, her voice dangerously soft. "That's interesting, because I don't remember drowning. I remember my loving husband pushing me off our yacht and laughing while I fought for my life in the ocean. I remember hearing you and Eleanor planning my murder. I remember everything, Robert." Eleanor began shaking so violently she had to collapse onto the couch, her face gray. Priscilla wondered if she might actually have a heart attack, and a grim part of her considered it a convenient saving for taxpayers. "How was all—" Eleanor managed to whisper. How did I survive? Or how did I discover your pathetic little conspiracy?" Priscilla rose and walked to the coffee table, picking up the wrapped music box. "The survival part was actually the easy part. You both underestimated me, just like you always have. I'm stronger than you thought, smarter than you assumed, and much more prepared than you could have imagined." She held out the gift to Robert, still frozen in the doorway. "As for discovering your plan, that wasn't hard either. You left a trail of evidence that a child could follow. Phone records, financial documents, security footage, witness testimony. Did you really think you could commit murder and fraud without anyone noticing?" Robert's paralysis finally broke. He staggered backward. "You can't prove anything. Even if you're alive, you can't prove we tried to kill you." Priscilla smiled, pressing play on a small recorder she'd placed on the side table. Rebecca's drunken confession filled the room, followed by Eleanor's frantic recorded phone calls about needing inheritance money. Finally, Robert's own voice, reassuring Rebecca that no one would ever know what really happened on the yacht. "I can prove everything," Priscilla said softly. "And I will." She gestured to the gift. "This is for both of you. A small token of my appreciation for teaching me what my family was really worth. Go ahead, open it." Robert's hands trembled as he took the beautifully wrapped box. Eleanor was hyperventilating on the couch, whimpering. The irony was palpable. A month ago, these two confident killers had celebrated their successful crime. Now, they were exposed, terrified criminals. "Open it," Priscilla repeated, her voice laced with an authority Robert found himself powerless to resist. With trembling fingers, he untied the silk ribbon and pulled away the elegant wrapping paper. The music box beneath was exquisite, hand-carved mahogany with golden inlays. For a moment, Robert simply stared, dreading what lay within. "It's beautiful," Eleanor whispered, trying to convince herself this was a normal gift, not evidence from beyond the grave. "Thank you. I chose it very carefully," Priscilla replied. "It plays Amazing Grace, the same song they performed at my funeral service, the one you both attended, pretending to grieve while planning how to spend my money." She nodded toward the box. "Go ahead, Robert. Open it and see what's inside." Robert lifted the lid with the caution one would afford a bomb. The familiar melody of Amazing Grace began to play. But instead of a dancing figurine, the box contained neatly organized photographs, documents, and a small scroll tied with black ribbon. His face went utterly white as he recognized the contents. Bank records showing his fraudulent loan applications, screenshots of texts between him and Rebecca, photos of them together taken by the private investigator, financial documents proving Eleanor's theft from her late husband's estate. "This is impossible," he whispered, picking up a photo of him and Rebecca kissing in a parking garage. "How did you get these?" "I told you, Robert. You left a trail that was impossible to miss. But that's not even the best part." Priscilla walked to the champagne bottle and opened it with practiced ease. The real masterpiece is that scroll at the bottom of the box. It contains the police reports, witness statements, and forensic evidence that proves you pushed me off that yacht with the intent to kill me. Eleanor made a sound like a wounded animal. "Police reports? What, police reports?" The champagne cork popped with a sound like a gunshot, making both Robert and Eleanor jump. Priscilla poured 2 glasses, holding them out to her would-be killers. "Oh, didn't I mention? The police have been investigating my accidental death for weeks now. Detective Sarah Rodriguez has been very thorough. She's discovered all sorts of interesting things about the timeline that night." Robert's suspicious behavior, Eleanor's financial desperation, Rebecca's role in providing inside information about my business operations. Robert dropped the music box, scattering its contents across the coffee table. This is insane. You can't just appear from the dead and expect people to believe some conspiracy theory. Conspiracy theory? Priscilla laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Robert, I have recordings of all three of you confessing to various aspects of the crime. Eleanor discussing how my death would solve her debt problems. You reassuring Rebecca that no one would ever know what really happened. Rebecca breaking down and admitting her guilt about helping to kill me. She took a sip of champagne, savoring the look of utter defeat on their faces. But my personal favorite piece of evidence is the yacht's black box data. You didn't know yachts had those, did you? It recorded everything. The exact time and location of my fall, the boat's immediate change in course, even the conversations that took place on deck. This was a bluff, but Robert and Eleanor didn't know it. Their faces mirrored complete belief. The recordings prove that you didn't search for me for 30 minutes like you told the Coast Guard, Priscilla continued. They prove you knew exactly where I went overboard because you pushed me there. They even picked up your voice saying, "Say hello to the sharks," right before I hit the water. Eleanor began sobbing uncontrollably. I never wanted to hurt you. It was Robert's idea. He said it was the only way to get the money we needed. Eleanor, shut up, Robert snapped. But it was too late. His mother's breakdown was providing precisely the kind of confession that would seal their fate. I was desperate, Eleanor continued through her tears. I owed so much money, and the lawyers were going to find out what I'd done with Harold's estate. Robert said your death would solve everything, that we'd inherit enough to fix all our problems. Priscilla set down her champagne glass and walked to the window. Detective Rodriguez and her team were waiting outside, but she wasn't quite ready to end this. She wanted Robert and Eleanor to fully comprehend what they had lost by trying to destroy her. Here's what's going to happen, she said, without turning around. In about 5 minutes, Detective Rodriguez is going to come through that door with arrest warrants for attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, and a dozen other charges. You'll both be taken to jail, where you'll await trial for trying to kill me. She turned back to face them, her expression colder than the ocean water she had nearly drowned in. Rebecca is already in custody. She was arrested this morning at her apartment, where she was found with enough alcohol and pills to kill herself. Apparently, the guilt was eating her alive. She's agreed to testify against both of you in exchange for a reduced sentence. Robert tried one last, desperate gambit. Priscilla, we can work this out. We're family. I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. I still love you. The lies flowed so easily, Priscilla almost admired his shamelessness. Almost. Love, she said quietly. Robert, you pushed me into the ocean and watched me struggle for my life. You attended my funeral and gave interviews about how much you missed me. You've been sleeping with my assistant and stealing from my company. If that's your definition of love, then I'm glad to be rid of it. She picked up her phone and sent a simple text message. Now. Within seconds, car doors slammed outside and footsteps sounded on the front walkway. Detective Rodriguez's voice carried through the door as she instructed her team to surround the house. Your ride is here, Priscilla said with profound satisfaction. I hope you enjoyed your inheritance while it lasted. The front door opened, and Detective Rodriguez entered, followed by 4 uniformed officers. She looked at Priscilla with professional respect, and at Robert and Eleanor with undisguised disgust. Robert Winters and Eleanor Winters, you're both under arrest for the attempted murder of Priscilla Winters, conspiracy to commit fraud, and multiple related charges. As the handcuffs clicked into place, Eleanor was still sobbing, and Robert stared at Priscilla with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. She met his gaze steadily, a deep sense of justice settling within her as he was led away. Justice, she thought, was a gift worth waiting for. The conclusion of Priscilla's story is not merely the end of a legal battle, but the beginning of a profound transformation. It highlights that the true measure of justice isn't just punishment for the guilty, but empowerment for the wronged. Her journey from victim to survivor, and then to an advocate for others, embodies the concept of post-traumatic growth. In many real-world scenarios, individuals who face profound betrayal or trauma often find new purpose and strength, channeling their experiences into helping others navigate similar struggles. This narrative serves as a powerful testament to the human capacity not only to endure, but to emerge stronger, wiser, and more compassionate from the crucible of adversity. 6 months later, Priscilla sat in the courtroom, listening as the judge read the final sentences in what the media had sensationalized as the yacht murder trial. The proceedings had been extensively covered, turning her story of survival and revenge into a national phenomenon. Robert received 25 years for attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. His once handsome face had become gaunt, ravaged by his time in jail, dramatically aged by the stress of his collapsed world. When the sentence was read, he showed no emotion. The arrogance and charm that once defined him were utterly extinguished. Eleanor received 15 years for conspiracy and accessory to attempted murder. Her health had deteriorated significantly during the trial, and she looked like a broken old woman as she was led away in shackles. The exposure of her theft from her late husband's estate during the investigation had added additional years to her sentence. Rebecca received the lightest sentence, 8 years, with the possibility of parole in 5, in exchange for her cooperation with prosecutors. Her testimony had been crucial in establishing the timeline and motive for the conspiracy. She had sobered up in jail and seemed genuinely remorseful, though Priscilla felt no sympathy for her former assistant's fate. "Justice has been served," District Attorney Michael Torres announced to the throng of reporters outside the courthouse. This case proves that no matter how carefully planned, crimes like these will not go unpunished. Mrs. Winter's courage in pursuing justice should be an inspiration to anyone who has faced betrayal and violence. Priscilla gave a brief, professional statement to the media, thanking the police and prosecutors, focusing on the legal outcome rather than her personal feelings. The private satisfaction of watching her enemies face consequences was something she preferred to keep to herself. The months since her dramatic return had been a whirlwind of activity. Nexus Technologies had not only recovered but thrived under the leadership team she had assembled, with Tom Chin stepping up as an excellent chief operating officer. The company's stock price had actually increased during the trial, as investors were impressed by the organization's stability and ethical leadership. Margaret Wu had proven an invaluable ally during the transition. As board chair, she had helped Priscilla restructure the company's leadership and implement new security protocols, background checks, and oversight systems, making it far harder for anyone to access confidential information or manipulate company resources. "The betrayal was painful," Priscilla told Margaret during one of their strategy meetings, "but it taught me to be more careful about who I trust with sensitive information. The company is stronger now because of what we learned." Maria Santos had been promoted to Senior Vice President of Operations, with expanded authority over personnel security and internal investigations. Her early suspicions about Rebecca had proven prescient, and her unwavering loyalty during the crisis had earned Priscilla's permanent trust and gratitude. The house where Robert and Eleanor had expected to claim their inheritance was sold, with the proceeds going to Priscilla's charitable foundation. She couldn't bear to live there anymore. Too many memories of betrayal and false affection. Instead, she bought a modern penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking San Francisco Bay. The open, bright space felt like a new beginning, a tangible manifestation of her newfound freedom. But the most satisfying change in her life was her work with other women who had faced financial abuse and betrayal. Priscilla had established the Phoenix Foundation, named for the mythical bird that rises from ashes, to provide legal aid and support services for women whose husbands or partners had tried to steal their assets or harm them financially. "Your story gives them hope," Janet told her during one of their regular foundation meetings. "When they see what you survived and how you fought back, it helps them believe they can do the same thing." The foundation had already helped dozens of women escape abusive financial relationships and rebuild their lives. Some cases involved elaborate fraud schemes, similar to what Robert had attempted. Others were simpler situations where controlling husbands had hidden assets or destroyed credit to maintain power over their wives. Each success story felt like another victory over the darkness that Robert and Eleanor had tried to bring into her life. They had intended to destroy her, but instead, They had unwittingly created something stronger and more purposeful than what had existed before. Detective Rodriguez had become a close friend during the investigation and trial. Her dedication to uncovering the truth had been instrumental in securing the convictions, and her commitment to protecting vulnerable people aligned perfectly with Priscilla's new mission. "You turned a terrible crime into something positive," Sarah told her during a celebratory dinner after the sentencing. "Not everyone would have had the strength to do what you did." Priscilla reflected on that observation as she stood on her penthouse balcony later that evening, watching the city lights twinkle below. The woman who had been pushed off that yacht 6 months ago had been naive in some ways, trusting people who didn't deserve it, failing to see warning signs that now, in retrospect, seemed blindingly obvious. But that same woman had possessed a core of strength her enemies had completely underestimated. She had survived not just the physical attempt on her life, but the emotional devastation of discovering that the people closest to her had wished her dead. She had transformed that survival into justice and channeled her experience into helping others. The soft buzz of her phone brought her back to the present. A text message from Tom. "Board meeting went great. Q3 profits up 23% from last year. The team wants to celebrate tomorrow night. Are you free?" She smiled as she typed back her acceptance. The life she had built after her supposed death was better than the one she had lost. She had people around her who had proven their loyalty under extreme circumstances. She had work that gave her purpose beyond just making money. Most importantly, she had the profound knowledge that she could survive anything and emerge stronger. Robert, Eleanor, and Rebecca would spend the next decade or more in prison, paying for their greed and cruelty. They had lost everything they tried to steal and had destroyed their own lives in the process. Meanwhile, Priscilla was thriving, helping others, and building something meaningful from the ashes of their betrayal. As she prepared for bed that night, Priscilla thought about the music box she had given Robert, the gift that contained all the evidence of their crimes. In a way, it had been the perfect metaphor for her entire experience, something beautiful on the outside that contained the ugly truth within. But unlike her enemies, she had chosen to use that truth to create something positive. The Phoenix Foundation would outlast all of them, helping women for generations to come. That was a legacy worth living for, and worth the pain of everything she had endured to create it. Justice, she had learned, wasn't just about punishment. It was about transformation, about taking the worst things that happened to you and using them to make the world a little bit better. And that was a gift that would keep giving long after Robert and Eleanor were forgotten.